What is up, duelists, and welcome to a little bit of a special video towards the end of 2025. As we wrap up the year in Yu-Gi-Oh, I felt like it was a good time to recap and review the year 2025. What a year it's been for Yu-Gi-Oh, honestly. I think, for the most part, it's been a pretty awesome year to be a Yu-Gi-Oh player. It's a pretty good time to be a duelist right now, and I wanna talk about some of the things that happened this year. It's probably going to be a little bit of a longer video this time around compared to what I usually do. I'm just going to sit back and yap about all the things that have happened this year. So there's going to be a couple of visuals throughout, but it's mostly also going to just be something you can listen to as a podcast, probably just lean back, have it run in the background, where I'm going to just run you through the year a little bit for both the TCG, Master Duel, Yu-Gi-Oh as a whole. And then also towards the end, I want to talk about some of my own experiences this year, maybe some of my performances in TCG, Master Duel, but also just like as a content creator, and then also just like what I'm expecting in 2026 from Yu-Gi-Oh, and also for the channels, all that good stuff. So as you can see, we have a lot to talk about, so let us just jump right in and just have a little bit of a chill discussion about everything that's been going on this year. If you feel like chiming in on the discussion on anything, feel free to leave comments down below and let me know how you felt about the year as a whole. Most importantly, this is not the design awards thingy. If you've noticed, or if you saw that I did that survey where I basically asked the community what they thought of the year in TCG and Master Duel in terms of like card design and balancing and all that kind of stuff. The results of this are in, and I've reached almost 5,000 responses to the survey, which I'm very happy for. Thank you everyone who participated. By the time you're seeing this, we are already compiling the results, so look out for that in the upcoming days. But right now, I'm basically just giving you guys my perspective, my review of the year 2025 in Yu-Gi-Oh! And I thought long about like where to start, because I mean, of course, a lot of things have been going on, and I thought about like how to structure this entire thing. And I feel like we're just gonna start by talking about the cards that came out, because I feel like that is one of the most important things when it comes to, of course, a trading card game, is what kind of cards they've released. And now I don't want to go over every single product that dropped this year, but like at least in terms of like the core sets, maybe we should talk about a little bit what has happened. So we kicked the year off in January with Supreme Darkness, which was a deck that ended up a pack that ended up releasing just a little bit of an add-on, I feel like, because we started the year in crossover breaker format, where basically Ryziel and Malice had kind of like taken over from Snake Eye. Yubel is kind of where we left off in towards the end of 2024. And then we got Ryziel and Malice, right? And so Supreme Darkness, of course, with Ryziel and Malice still being at a relatively high power level, or pretty high power level at that time, felt like an add-on to that format, basically just giving us a couple of engines. It gave us Atlantean Mermail support, it gave us Crystron, it gave us Primite, and a couple of those things ended up being pretty relevant later down the line, but immediately it felt like mainly a Ryziel buff because it had Eclipse Twins, which was the first step towards making Ryziel boards a lot harder to break, because, you know, and this is also going to be a topic, of course, in this discussion when we talk about archetype design. But of course, Ryziel started out as like a deck that, you know, not everyone was happy with it, because it was a tier 1 deck, and there's sometimes people who simply dislike a deck because it is good. But I felt like in the beginning, Ryziel was a pretty balanced archetype, where, you know, it actually was weak to board breakers a fair bit. It had its choke points because Duo Drive could be Ashed, Impermed, Ghost Ogre, Veilered, whatsoever. And then with Supreme Darkness, they started to give that deck even more power, because Eclipse Twins made it harder to board break, because now the detonator basically came back once you outed it, right? But some of the other engines in this pack, of course, ended up getting a lot stronger towards the later months of the year. You know, Crystron once we got K9, or Primite once we got Blue Eyes, you know, ended up being pretty meta relevant things. So I think looking back, Supreme Darkness actually was a pretty decent pack, even though the impact at the time of release I think was not as large. It also gave us the first wave of Mitsurugi, which of course was then solidified by Alliance Insight, which I think Alliance Insight, on the other hand, was the pack that gave us some incredibly broken like pieces to glue these strategies together and really cement them in like the top tier. And this is like one of my out of the core boosters, probably my least favorite of the year, because I feel like it just wasn't all that necessary in terms of the format in it. And what I mean by this is, like, I feel like Malice and Ryziel were both already in pretty solid positions before this set dropped, and even Mitsurugi was already a viable strategy before Habakiri came out. I mean, believe it or not, with how good of a card Habakiri is, but people were already playing Mitsurugi Ryziel beforehand. I think a couple of people did okay with it at YCS, the one that Dinkapui won in the UK. I forget where exactly it was. But that one, like, the decks were already pretty good, and then I feel like Alliance Insight, it felt like a kind of a move to just make sure that those decks are top tier for basically the entire year, right? Like, we got Star Ryziel eliminating any kind of choke point from Ryziel and also making it a super powerful splash in any other deck, because you can now basically insulate all of your combos with Star Ryziel into cross and generate a lot of card advantage, a lot of pressure, and then just pivot into whatever, you know. You can pivot into Mitsurugi. At the time, people were playing Ryziel Fiendsmith, and so on and so forth. And also, of course, Alliance Insight, as the cover suggests, gave us the Adignister support and March Share, which I don't have to tell you how powerful that made Malice over the course of the year. I mean, we are still, I'm recording this end of December, we are still in Malice format in basically any format, like TCG, Master Duel, even the OCG, even though, of course, OCG just got a ban list. And so I'm not entirely sure how Malice is going to look after that. But with the Adignister cards and March Share, I mean, Malice has been cemented as the dominant force that it is. And of course, second wave of Mitsurugi support gave us Habakiri, which immediately made Mitsurugi into a deck that can basically, it was able to hold its own as a pure deck. And we're going to talk about general archetype design in a second, but of course it also enabled a whole bunch of hybrid versions of Mitsurugi from that point on. You know, we've seen Mitsurugi Ryziel, which was the most obvious one in the beginning, but Mitsurugi Fiendsmith, Mitsurugi Orchist, Mitsurugi K9, Mitsurugi Yami, even Mitsurugi Malice was a thing at some point, because it was just helping you get more bodies and apply pressure and bait out hand traps and so on. So that a lot of that stuff, a lot of the most broken things that were enabled this year happened because of Alliance Insight, and I think Alliance Insight probably the best core set of the year in terms of raw card quality. On the other hand, a pack that I really appreciated, and I mean, who would have guessed, Duelist's Advance, giving us, you know, support for some decks that really fit my personal playstyle. After all, that's also something, you know, my view on Yu-Gi-Oh! And which kind of decks I like is highly subjective, and it just so happens that some of the stuff that got support in Duelist's Advance were just decks that I, at the time, really enjoyed. You know, we were talking Holy Sue, of course, making pure Vanquish Soul, a deck that I ended up playing at the European Championship meta, and I really enjoyed that deck because it really felt like a breath of fresh air to me in terms of just like before this, essentially, around the time of national season, when everyone was playing Mitsurugi Ryziel and Malice, it really felt like a format where everyone was playing the big three, right? Fualos, Perulia, and Drollin Lockbird were in everyone's deck, basically, including my own. And those were the cards you were hoping to draw against Mitsu Ryziel, because otherwise that deck was just basically impossible to stop. And with the introduction of March Hare and the Adignister stuff, Perulia also ended up being a pretty good card against Malice. So those were kind of like your go-to non-engine, and Vanquish Soul really was a deck that didn't suffer from those non-engine as much, and because you could just really just call it a day, you know, like you can summon a couple times from deck or hand with that deck, but you could just say like, okay, I'll pass, and do a couple of things on your turn. And of course, this set also gave us Sky Striker. It gave us Archmage, which I thought was a cool archetype, even though it never really took off in the meta. It was good in Genesis, or still is good in Genesis, which Genesis is going to be its whole own topic later down the line. But I like Duelist Advance, even though, of course, it did have some stuff like Lunalight, which ended up being more powerful than people maybe anticipated in the beginning. And also some Automat support, which in the TCG didn't really take off, but ended up being really powerful in Master Duel at the moment, and probably alongside Malice, the most powerful deck in the most recent Duelist Cup. And that, on the other hand, is a deck that I don't really vibe with as much, but yeah, I mean, it's a give and take. Justice Hunters is obviously, and I think it goes without much competition. I did say Alliance Insight, probably the most powerful core booster set of the entire year. I think Justice Hunters is the most powerful booster set overall from the entire year. Of course, giving us not only Yummy, not only K9, but also Draco Tail. Like, it's basically probably the best deck building pack of all time, because all three archetypes from it are immediately meta viable and immediately like top tier. Yami and Draco Tail both able to hold their own as a pure deck, while K9 is kind of like designated to be like a hybrid deck. People have been trying pure K9, and I actually do think the pure K9 deck is quite cool, but it's really better as a hybrid, you know, really, really powerful. Whether it's in the beginning, it was mostly K9 Vanquish Soul and K9 Crystron. But of course, there's a bunch of other things you can do with K9, you know, whether it's Sulfur Cord or Mitsurugi or whatever. There's been a whole lot of ways to merge different engines together, which has been basically like one of the core stories of this year, is that a lot of archetypes, even though they are completely fine on their own, just end up achieving a higher like power level, a higher ceiling by just mashing them together. Which is something we're going to talk about in a second as well. But I think that's one of the big takeaways from 2025, is like the more powerful Yu-Gi-Oh cards get, the more powerful it also gets if you combine them together. And that is something that, of course, some of the Justice Hunters archetypes are very notorious for, with Yami ultimately ending up being like a hybrid with Mitsurugi, and K9 obviously going with almost anything at this point. I liked Justice Hunters when it came out, and I still do. Not everything about this pack is perfect in my opinion, but I really like Draco Tail. I also really like Pure Yummy as a deck. I think it's a really healthy way to design a combo deck, because I mean, of course, it is a combo deck, as most Yu-Gi-Oh decks these days are. But I feel like Pure Yummy is kind of like at this spot where I think it's strong enough for it to see top tier meta viability, but not like to the point where you just can't beat its end board if it gets to combo with one singular card. And I just feel like it's kind of like reached a certain sweet spot for me, where I think it's acceptable, the combo it does. Of course, once again, that is subjective, but I felt like it was weak enough to board breakers or weak enough to interruptions, and it had some choke points, you know, sometimes interrupting Cupsy Yummy to stop them from getting to Yummy Surprise, or some stuff like that. I felt like offered enough like agency for playing against it, which made me really appreciate it. But yeah, then we had Doom of Dimensions, which feels like the worst core booster set of the year. We got that one in late September, and it gave us Marshmallow Yummy, which was obviously huge for Yummy, because until that point, Yummy could sometimes struggle with getting their first body removed off the field, and Marshmallow Yummy being an extender, of course, helped the deck a ton. But also, the ability to recur the banished field spells is kind of huge, because previously to this, banishing the Yummy minion, which is the one that boosts their attack by 500 per Yummy or Light Beast, they were unable to get it back from the banished pile. And now with Marshmallow Yummy, there was actually a way to recycle it. So that kind of like took away that win condition when you're playing against Pure Yummy. Previously, SP Little Knight on the field spell sometimes was a big deal, because they just couldn't really get over your big monsters anymore, even if they had a bunch of card advantage. But now they had a way to fix that. So once again, similar to Star Isil, they showed a tendency this year to release a basically fix for a problem of one of their top tier meta decks, right? And you can look at that from multiple perspectives, I guess. I mean, if the deck is meta, it kind of makes sense for them to print another card for it in a core booster set. Like, I think that's been a pattern that made some sense, you know, tying the side set together with the core set by printing cards for the archetype in both, you know, release the archetype there and then print support later. Makes sense, of course. On the other hand, sometimes when the deck is already meta, in the case like the case was with Ryziel, like the case was with Malice, and also with Yummy, all of those decks were already meta decks. So did they really need that support? I suppose that is up to everyone to decide. But I mean, as someone who liked pure Yummy, I didn't really mind Marshmallow coming out. But of course, it has not only helped pure Yummy, it's also one of the best starters in decks like Mitsurugi Yummy, because it doesn't even take your normal summon, you know? Like the best starter, depending on how you look at it, is either Kapsi Yummy or Marshmallow Yummy. One of them because it gets card advantage on summon, or the other one because it doesn't even need your normal summon. So that was of course, really big deal. Other than that, Doom of Dimensions was a pretty weak set, I would say. It did have Radiant Typhoon, which ended up being good in Genesis format. It had, of course, the Dracotail Frixel, which was the Dracotail support card. Not nearly as good as Marshmallow, though, in terms of the level of support. Which ultimately, and this is something we're going to circle back to later, but it felt like in Doom of Dimensions, it was a lackluster set in terms of, you know, people wanting to open it. Because you basically pull Marshmallow or a good QCR or you bust, right? Which is a big topic with Yu-Gi-Oh! I think there's a lot of positive stuff that we're going to get to in a second about Yu-Gi-Oh! But I think one of the challenges for Yu-Gi-Oh! Moving forward is that they should be looking to increase the quality of product, especially core booster sets. And there's already been a couple of steps announced for this, which we're going to talk about in a second. I mean, the full arts and frame breaks and stuff like that. Basically, one challenge that Yu-Gi-Oh! Is facing right now is in order for it to be as affordable as possible and also, you know, collectible as possible. I think they should be looking to revamp some of the product design, and full arts could help with that. But I have a segment planned for the full art announcement in a little bit, so we're gonna circle back to that in a moment. But Doom of Dimensions, in terms of meta impact, you know, gave us Marshmallow Yummy, basically, if you really want to simplify it. You know, Dracotail Sting was probably the better support than Dracotail Frixel, actually, even though Frixel did enable the branded version of Dracotail to kind of like become the standard, because you now had a light monster to send for branded fusion to summon Sanctifier or Albion, which was of course huge, but mainly Marshmallow. And I'm purposely skipping over the everything that isn't a new booster pack. Basically, of course, I'm aware like the Blue Eye structure deck happened, or the Maze set happened that gave us Odeon, and so on. But I didn't want to ramble about the products for too long, so we're gonna finish things off here with Phantom Revenge, which is an interesting talking point because it came out in December, so it's literally not had much time to really show off anything. At the same time, it's also pretty clear that the three archetypes, Cool Tune, Enneacraft, and Hecka Hands, are all much weaker than all of the other things that we've talked about so far, you know, like whether it's legacy support like the Vanquish Soul cards, or whether it's new archetypes like Mitsurugi, Yami, Dracotail, K9, and so on. This pack is giving us weaker archetypes, which might sound like a negative, but I actually don't think it is. I think, if anything, the problem is not the Phantom Revenge archetypes being too weak. I think it's more like the other archetypes maybe being a little bit too powerful and a little bit too easy to combine with other archetypes. Because that is something that, especially Enneacraft, and also to an extent Cool Tune, differentiate from the previously mentioned archetypes, is that Cool Tune and Enneacraft are really contained within their own archetypes because they kind of have these proper locks, which is, I think, the biggest takeaway from 2025, is that decks kind of need that, right? And so, at least my personal one. I mean, there's going to be people who disagree with this, but that's fine. That's why we're discussing this. You can leave your comments on this matter down below, of course. But I felt like this was a takeaway for me personally, that we need to be a little more careful with how easy it is to splash certain archetypes together. And so my takeaway from Phantom Revenge is actually that these archetypes are not bad. They are just designed properly. And I actually think that they are pretty interesting. Specifically, Enneacraft, if there is more support in the future, I think it's a deck that I could see myself picking up. I think it's very unique. I think it's got a very unique playstyle, win condition, and so on. It's more of a control deck, less combo heavy. I like it. But I mean, it's just different, you know? So some people are going to like it, some people are not going to like it. But with Phantom Revenge, I enjoyed the fact that none of these decks came out as like overpowered. Whether you like their playstyle or not, I thought it was refreshing that it wasn't like an immediately tier 1 strategy that is expected to get support in future sets, right? Like how it was with Yami, Draco Tail, and K9. So I like Phantom Revenge, even though, of course, it not having a single top tier deck at the moment is once again kind of weakening its product quality, or like it's not the greatest set ever to open because most of the stuff is actually quite cheap, which of course is good for the player base if the new archetypes are cheap, but it's not great for the vendors who are pre-ordering boxes or cases of Phantom Revenge, and then they receive them, and then the stuff in it doesn't sell for a whole lot because the decks are not actually that good in terms of meta viability, right? But yeah, so that's basically that, which in terms of archetype design, the year 2025, I would give it a 7 or an 8 out of 10 overall. I'm leaning towards an 8, which is interesting to me, very interesting actually, because as someone who's been very vocal about my dislike of some of the archetypes that released in 2024, or most of the archetypes actually, you know, I felt like, I mean, of course, I've started complaining about like powerful 1-card combos and stuff in like, I don't know, 2023 or something, or 2022 even, when it's become a meme at this point that I hate Mathmech Circular, right? But like, I mean, at this point, they've made a bunch more of those kind of cards, and some of the play styles that I was worrying about back in the day have made it into top tier Yu-Gi-Oh! Meta viability multiple times since then. And in 2024, there's a couple of archetypes and playstyles that I really disliked personally. You know, I'm looking at, of course, Snake Eyes, Yubel, Tenpai, and Malice towards the end of the year. The way I look at 2024 genuinely is like one of the weaker years in terms of archetype design that Yu-Gi-Oh! Has ever had since I've played it. And I'm happy to say that I think 2025, they did a really good job at changing direction at least a little bit. Of course, in a game without rotation, they have to make powerful decks and in order to sell product. And so like it was still naturally going to be like they were going to release some pretty powerful stuff this year to compete with the stuff that they released in the previous year. But I really think a lot of the decks in 2025 are designed in a much more healthier and fun way than they were in 2024. You know, even decks like Mitsurugi, Vanquish Soul, I'm just bringing up some random deck lists that I've played throughout the year, or Yami, like a lot of these decks, Draco Tail, a lot of these decks I enjoyed quite a lot when they were played in their pure form. You know, pure Mitsurugi was a really cool deck, pure Vanquish Soul was a really cool deck, pure Yami was a really cool deck, and Draco Tail is awesome as well. So I've been having a good time this year with the decks that I've chosen for the most part, which is cool to see that like it can go from myself really disliking archetype design in one year, and they really do like a full turn and then release a bunch of archetypes that I really like in 2025. Was really cool to see. I was really happy about that because, you know, at some points throughout 2024, I did ask myself the question, like, if they keep going down this route, how long am I gonna enjoy Yu-Gi-Oh for? If decks like Snake Eye and Yubel keep dominating the format, and if more and more of that stuff comes out, is there maybe ever gonna be a time where I stop enjoying Yu-Gi-Oh? Is a genuine concern that I had. It hasn't happened, you know, but it's something that I was concerned about. And I'm happy to say that I think archetype design this year has been much cooler for myself personally, which leads me to the only quote-unquote problem that I have, and it's something that I've already talked about a little bit earlier, and that is, of course, the power levels that these decks reach once you combine them with other decks, right? Because I did say if they are played in their pure form, I really enjoy them. Of course, that is not always the deck that ends up being the most successful. You know, like I was able to top nationals with pure Mitsurugi. I topped the European Championship with pure Vanquish Soul. But like the decks that ended up doing well, and also the deck that ended up winning the World Championship, for example, is K9 Vanquish Soul, not Pure Vanquish Soul. Of course, at that point, at YCS Bologna, which was also won by K9 Vanquish Soul, they had quite heavily hit Vanquish Soul Raisin and Stake Your Soul, and now people were forced to play a hybrid version of Vanquish Soul, but like the same is true for Mitsurugi and Yami, right? Like those two decks together had arguably more success than the individual parts. And even at the time when I topped Nationals with Pure Mitsurugi, arguably the more successful version of this deck was Mitsurugi Ryziel, which was basically just more ceiling, like take out some non-engine, play higher ceiling, and auto-win the game every time your opponent doesn't have Fuva, Purulia, or Droll Lockbird, right? Which is just something I didn't really vibe with. I like playing the more like low to the ceiling, lower ceiling, low to the ground strategies that like need to work for the win, I guess, but aren't as weak to like the high impact hand traps as some of the other decks, right? I do think there's like some pros and cons to these, like Ryziel Mitsu is not strictly better than Pure Mitsu, but I think if you look back at this year and if you compile all the data, I think you will find that hybrid versions of decks were probably more successful than the individual components, which I think is a little sad, at least personally. I would have preferred if we had played, you know, pure Mitsu versus pure Vanquish Soul or pure Yami, pure Draco Tail, and so on. Not for the sake of the decks being pure, I don't really care about that. I just felt like the decks were already designed to be meta viable in their pure form. I think they were powerful enough, like in the grand scheme of things. I think the board that a pure Mitsurugi deck makes or a pure Yami deck makes, I think we can all hopefully agree that you can look at that end board and be like, yep, that's about as strong as it should be, maybe for a deck that gets to play like as much non-engine as these modern decks do. I feel like, you know, an end board of IP Masquerena, Futsu with Murakumo engrave, Prayers face down, Magatama or Purification searched, as well as non-engine, that's probably as good as it should be, you know. And for pure Yami as well, the amount of interruption that pure Yami has is a lot. And these decks sometimes, like, they still play through hand traps. They have pretty good plan Bs into Mulcharmies, and so on and so forth. So I felt like, you know, in terms of archetype design, the power level was fine for the pure decks. I don't think we would be playing some boring ass low power decks if they were all played pure. Pure Vanquish Soul as well, really powerful deck. Pure Draco Tail, powerful deck. All of them meta on their own. But of course, naturally, people figured out, hey, why leave it at that if, why leave it at the pure Mitsu board and maybe give the opponent a small chance to win if I can just do Mitsu Ryziel or Mitsu Yami later down the line once they banned King of the Frail Limbs, right? And basically, I know I've said this in previous videos, and feel free to let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, but I really, the conclusion that I have arrived at for myself is that the archetypes were designed pretty well this year in terms of their power level. The only thing that they kind of left out, or maybe it was an oversight, I'm not sure if it's intended or not, but I think they should not have been as easily splashable with each other. I mean, in some cases it was probably on purpose, like Mitsurugi Ryziel was probably on purpose, but then maybe they didn't think it was going to be that popular, so they got rid of King of the Fair Limbs. But I can't imagine something like Mitsu Yami being intended, really. I mean, of course they knew that Yami was going to play Herald of the Arclight, but realistically I'm not sure if they saw all that coming. But they probably should have. I mean, it's not the only thing that Mitsurugi is doing, right? Mitsurugi can basically start off almost anything because it makes free rank 4s, it makes rank 8s, gives you a bunch of bodies. So there's a bunch of decks that can use Habakiri as a starter, right? Yeah, that's archetype design in 2025. I'm overall feeling pretty positive about it, even though, of course, some of these decks are definitely too powerful. And it has kind of led us into this spot right now, which, like, low impact, like Yu-Gi-Oh is definitely, Yu-Gi-Oh is changing, an ever-changing game, and the non-engine and what the non-engine needs to do kind of like changes with it. And I feel like we are starting to reach a point where hand traps have been so pivotal and so important for Yu-Gi-Oh ever since, like, I don't know, 2017, where it's like basically every single deck in like 2018-19 was running like 3 Ash, 3 Imperm, and those were your key cards to win going second. Those were the cards you needed to draw against decks like Goki or whatever to even have a chance. And I think in modern Yu-Gi-Oh, I think decks are more and more designed to often ignore these cards, really. Or at least if you have one extender, you do everything you wanted to do anyways through an Imperm or through an Ash Blossom. And so to me personally, cards like Imperm and Ash are falling more and more out of favor. And the role that they played for so long is like now kind of fulfilled by cards like Fuwalos, Perulia, and Droll and Lockbird, where some of these modern Yu-Gi-Oh decks, really, if you don't draw specifically a Charmy or a Droll, they will literally make a board that you cannot really break. And I do think that is a form of the mini game that I don't like as much. So I mean, you can tackle this from both sides. You can either make decks less powerful, which would be my preferred way, or you could either make more cards that serve a similar purpose. Basically, you have to upgrade. Now they've upgraded engine a lot, so they would also have to upgrade non-engine significantly, which is kind of like this arms race that people often criticize. It's like, oh, you made Nibiru to beat combo decks, but then you made combo decks beat Nibiru, so now you have to give us a better Nibiru, and it's just a spiral of power creep, right? So I would really prefer if they instead just made more decks that you don't necessarily have to hand trap or you lose the game. Because, I mean, let's face it, statistically, if you play like 3 Fuwas, 3 Perulias, maybe some Meowls, maybe Droll and Lockbird, maybe some other powerful like turn 0 interruptions like Holy Sue or Izuna or whatever, you are more likely to draw one of those cards than not. So most of the Yu-Gi-Oh games are fine, but there are some where your opponent just ashes your Charmy, or you don't even draw a Charmy to begin with, and then they just make a board you can't beat. And I don't think that's a desirable play pattern, even if it only happens, I don't know, 20% of the time, because usually people don't combo uninterrupted. But it's an interesting food for thought for sure. And I mean, I think in reality, I kind of like stand on both sides of the argument. I think I would like decks to be a little bit weaker in terms of their end board, and a little less easy to combine. But at the same time, I'm not sure how realistic that is. So I think like another maybe good non-engine card would be healthy, which is also the reason why I felt about Ash Blossom the way that I felt in my latest video, which has sparked a lot of discourse, where Ash Blossom to me doesn't really feel like a great card going second anymore. I mean, it helps sometimes, but if Ash Blossom helps, it's usually not very interesting either, because it's when your opponent just has one starter, you ash it and they pass, and then you just win, which doesn't feel like a super interesting gameplay loop to me. Because I feel like if you ash something and then they have the extender, then it feels like you've just hand looped yourself, and now you're playing against the full combo with 4 cards. And so I really think the most common use and the best use for Ash Blossom right now is just go first, ash the Charmy, and then do your stuff uninterrupted. Which I'm not a big fan of that gameplay pattern that Ash Blossom provides at the moment. But yeah, once again, leave your thoughts on this in the comments down below. I'm always happy to read what people think on this matter. So yeah. The only other thing for the TCG side of like the design side of things is I quickly want to like talk about ban list decisions that have been made this year. So the first ban list we got was the one on April 7th, which was a pretty big one actually, considering a lot of the things that were on here directly impacted Ryziel and Malice format. We got Link Decoder banned, we got Griffin banned, we got Abyss Dweller banned, a lot of cards banned, Bahamut Shark as well, which was more like a Mermail hit, but Limited Shifter, severe hits to Malice and Ryziel by limiting Detonator, Bonfire, semi-limiting X, Ice, and Sword, semi-limiting Dormouse and White Rabbit. It was basically like, of course, in hindsight, we know that with all the support that these decks received in Supreme Darkness and Alliance Insight, they were completely fine with those changes. They basically didn't even care. But I mean, one can only imagine how strong these decks would have been had they not made those changes at all. And so I'm still happy they did. The power level of those decks was still obviously obscene with Alliance Insight and Supreme Darkness support. Specifically, like the one, like basically Malice was able to survive based off of the Adignister hit support that they got. It was like still really broken on its own. Whereas I think Ryziel after this was kind of like forced into this hybrid direction where it was a lot of like Mitsu Ryziel, Onomat Ryziel, and so on and so forth from that point on. Because they basically had hit pure Ryziel a decent amount. Not to like unplayability, but a decent amount. Then we got fast forward to September after Vanquish Soul had joined the fray. We got another hit, another list that did a lot of things right and a couple of things wrong. In my opinion, this is the one that happened after Justice Hunters came out already. And it finally got rid of Moon. It banned Splash Mage, which, spoilers, did not kill Malice once again. We got rid of King of the Pharaoh Limbs to stop the bridging from Mitsurugi into Ryziel, or rather the other way around. We got rid of Paradise Smasher, which was one of the most toxic things that K9 was doing, which of course in hindsight we know that was just replaced by Artifact Mjolnir. But we also had significant hits to Ryziel in the limited section, as we limited X Ryziel, we limited Arclight to hit Yami a little bit. We limited Raisin and Stygia Soul, which are my least favorite banlist hits of the entire year, probably, because it basically eliminated pure Vanquish Soul, and as we all know by now, just forced everyone to play the higher ceiling, higher variance, higher combo K9 Vanquish Soul. But pure Vanquish Soul was basically completely killed off in this ban list. Alongside some other solid hits, you know, Dormouse to 1, obviously welcome. Limit Obedience Schooled. Once again, this is kind of like a similar hit to Raisin and Stake Your Soul because it mainly targets pure Yummy and kind of like strengthens the other decks, like the hybrid versions in comparison. But at the time, I don't think they were as much of a topic yet. So I guess that was fair enough. But yeah, I mean, and they also gave us back Ash and Poplar because without original, kind of whatever. And this was, I think, supposed to be the last Forbidden Unlimited list of the year. Of course, it was, you know, there was somewhat of an incident after this one happened because there was a couple of pretty big oversights on this one. It was supposed to give us this like super fair Yummy and Dracotail format, and then we had the YCS happen where basically everyone was just floodgating left and right because all the top tier decks were weak to D-Barrier, they didn't hit Mjolnir, the Ryziel decks were back doing Protoss things, and it was just a very tough YCS to watch. And so we got another ban list, which was obviously very, very welcome. Where it was kind of like just a DLC to the format where they just banned 7 of the most toxic cards in the format. They got rid of Protoss, Mjolnir, 2 of the barrier statues, Fossil Dyna, Ouroboros, and D-Barrier, which is of course not all the floodgates in Yu-Gi-Oh, but it was a chunk, a really healthy chunk. And of course, this goes down as one of the best things that they've ever done in Yu-Gi-Oh history, essentially. Because they finally got rid of a bunch of toxic floodgates in Yu-Gi-Oh! They're not done, the job is not done, but I'm very happy that they have exhibited some willingness to handle these cards, and yeah, this is probably one of my favorite things, if not my favorite thing that has happened this year. Not only because they banned so many floodgates, but it felt like they did it as a direct response to the thing that happened, right? It felt like some of the quickest they've ever done. Sometimes it feels like they're lagging behind with their ban list a little bit. But with this one, it feels like, you know, there was some uproar in the community. I also made a video about it after that YCS. It was a big problem. Everyone saw it and they acted accordingly. And that was pretty cool. But yeah, I mean, of course, this topic, I think at this point, 99% of the community agrees that these cards should go. So everyone's always asking, why are we not handling this properly? And this is the one time where it was actually handled properly. So huge deal, of course, this one. But yeah, so overall, ban list decisions over the course of the year, I would say I'll give them a 7 or an 8 out of 10 as well. I think my least favorite one is the Vanquish Soul hits that happened, because I like pure Vanquish Soul and I don't like K9. So I don't like that that's basically how the deck needs to be played now. And I say this as someone who did top YCS Bologna with K9 Vanquish Soul. The Vanquish Soul cards are like only a shadow of what they once were. And the K9 cards are now doing the heavy lifting, and it is very much a high ceiling combo deck now. But yeah. Other than that, there was a lot of bangers here. You know, a lot of decisions I can get behind. A lot of cool stuff that happened this year, and I'm really looking forward to some of their future plans with this game. Because of course, some of the archetype design suggests that they want a lower power level, but they weren't careful enough with it. And the ban lists, in my opinion, strengthen that assumption a little bit. Which leads me into the next topic for this whole discussion, which is things that happened outside of the game itself, right? Outside of the cards that came out and the ban lists. We had a couple of things that were actually quite huge this year happen for Yu-Gi-Oh! And first and foremost, I want to mention the new pricing that we got, because of course Yu-Gi-Oh! Pricing is something that has been a topic for so long, and people have been complaining about this. Other card games have been making fun of Yu-Gi-Oh! For their pricing for such a long time. And in May, they announced that we would be getting YCS and WCQ prize cards for more than just the winner and the top three, basically, which were going to be stamped versions of other cards. And it starts at a day 2 promo pack that you get, where you can pull 1 of 10 stamped cards. And then for top 32, you get a stamped card trooper, and for top 16, you get a stamped effect veiler, which the individual card choices here, some I think are debatable. I mean, you know, the pack definitely has a couple of hits and a couple of misses. You know, we're looking at, there's a Blue Eyes White Dragon in there, but there's also a Gagaga Magician, and one of them is significantly worth more than the other. But, you know, that aside, huge step in the right direction. And I can tell you, as someone who's won a bunch of these, or rather, I'm not a bunch is the wrong word, but I've won prize packs, I've won card trooper, 2 card troopers and 1 effect veiler at YCS Bologna. This stuff is good. You know, this is good stuff. You get you can move these for 3 digits. The effect veiler in the beginning, even I heard of some that were going for 4 digits amounts of money. I don't think they go for that much anymore, but even just the fact that you get something that can make it all worth if you don't end up winning the tournament is a huge step in the right direction. And once again, I don't want to praise this too much, because all they really had to do was print a Yu-Gi-Oh! Card with a stamp, which costs them basically nothing. But it still is a huge step for the community. It's basically a small step for them, but it still goes a long way for us, the players. So I'm really happy they did it. And I've always been saying, like, of course, I mean, cash prizes are good, but from their perspective, cash prizes are also super inefficient, because it costs them a lot of money to give us cash, whereas they can give us a lot with a lot less, basically, in terms of their investment. But we still get a lot out of it. You know, if they just give us an effect veiler instead of giving us, I don't know, $500 in pricing, they can just give us an effect veiler, and that's much cheaper for them. So that always made more sense, in my opinion, for them to do this, and so they finally did. And I'm really happy that they did this. There's basically no negative here. Instead, the only thing I would say is, like, I hope that they pick a couple, like, even better cards. I mean, effect veiler is not a bad Yu-Gi-Oh card, but, like, just imagine if this was Mulcharmies or the Dominus card or whatever, you know, something a little more recent, a little bit more powerful, a little more popular even, because effect veiler is not played that much. And of course, card trooper is basically a nostalgia card only, and as a result ended up going for, you know, it's still not a cheap card by no means, but I think it could be better just based off card choice alone, which is something that they should aim for probably. But yeah, that was an awesome change. Another change that is a little more controversial, and I'm still not 100% sure on how to feel about it, is of course the changes to tournament structure that they have made, which are basically 2 major changes, which probably deserve their own little discussion each. The first thing they did was they adjusted the round timer to 50 minutes and adjusted the timeout rules to, instead of, you know, the whole thing we had where the player with more life points wins the game and then there could be a draw if it's 1-1 and so on. Now, if you reach 50 minutes, the match ends immediately, and if there is no clear winner, there is a double loss awarded. It doesn't matter if you are up 1-0 and then game 2 goes into time and you have 8,000 life points and your opponent has 100. It is still a double loss. It doesn't matter who has more life points. It doesn't matter, you know, whatever. So, this was something that was initially received with, I think, a decent portion of backlash. Where I do see the idea behind all of this, where, you know, basically, if I had to put it into my own words, I would say what they're trying to do here is remove any incentive to slow play, right? Because now if a match goes to time, it serves nobody. None of the two players gain any benefit from slow playing ever, right? And I think that was one of the most outrageous factors of the previous time rules, where if you go to time and you have more life points, you just win the game, right? And potentially the match. Which has caused a lot of problems, in my opinion, where players would just be incentivized to play slower or whatever if they were ahead in life points and otherwise losing the game. And so it's created a lot of tension in Yu-Gi-Oh matches ever since it's been around. So while I didn't think that this rule was perfect, I did think removing this aspect of slow playing, basically never giving you a reason to slow play in any circumstance, was a pretty good change, because it just takes a lot of tension away from both players, because now instead of one player wanting the game to go to time and the other one to not go to time, now both players always want the same thing, which is to get done with the match as quickly as possible. Of course, sometimes when you play long back and forth matches, this can be punishing, and sometimes it incentivizes people to scoop maybe earlier than they should, which is definitely some of the negatives that this change has had. But I think overall, so far, while it's not perfect, I think the positives outweigh the negatives. On top of this, also, they remove completely the aspect of intentional draws, which, you know, somehow, miraculously, at big tournaments in the last round, whereas in all previous rounds, the rate of people that had draws was normal, in the last round, like at, I don't know, at the X2s, if X2-1 made it into Top Cut, miraculously a bunch of people started getting draws in the last round and making it into Top Cut, and therefore taking away the chances of maybe some X3s to make it or whatever. It was just not good. So there are problems with this time rule, I think, but I think they all pale in comparison to what we previously had. Like, I think people that notice problems with the new time rules sometimes forget how bad the previous time rules really were if you look into it. And I think that's my takeaway from this. I hope that they maybe go ahead in like a year or two and review this and maybe give us an update on it, and improve it a little bit further. But for now, I do view it as a step in the right direction. You know, no reason for any malicious like slow plays. Both players want the game to finish in a reasonable pace. No more intentional drawing and stuff like that. Those are some pretty toxic things to take away from the game, so that's good. But yeah, once again, let me know your experiences with this. I can also say I haven't had a double game loss yet in any of my tournaments. There are instances where it could have happened, but I do think that's probably the most mature way for the community to handle this. I think if you are in a spot where your opponent would clearly be winning the game and it's approaching timeout, and you have like, I don't know, 30 seconds or a minute left, and you recognize that you would lose this game, just scoop it up. Just scoop it up. That's what I've been doing at regionals and stuff. Like, if I see my opponent is comboing and I don't have a way to stop it, or they're probably going to go for game this turn and I have no way to, like, I'm clearly gonna lose this game, just scoop it up. It's better for your tiebreaker if you lose to your opponent rather than getting a double loss, because of course a double loss is bad for your tiebreakers, because the tiebreakers are calculated by the records of your opponents. So if you, let's say you are 5-0 and then you have a double loss, you have now lost to someone who is 5-1. Whereas if you scoop to them, you have now lost to someone who is 6-0. So your tiebreaker is better. So if you are in a clearly losing position, I think just giving your opponent the win is a healthier way to approach it for everybody, right? But yeah, I mean, I think at a point where it's still completely open, I think it's completely fine to keep playing, and not just you're not supposed to just hand free wins to everybody. But like if your opponent is clearly winning, then I think there's nothing wrong with just recognizing that and being a good sport about it. And I think that's something that if the community keeps like learning from this, you know, that it takes time for everyone to adapt to the new time rules. We might reach a point where that's just the common like consensus, and then we all have a much healthier environment than what we used to have, right? But yeah, once again, let me know how your experience of this entire thing went. And then the other thing, which in my opinion is a little bit smaller, is that they added 3 rounds to big tournaments, and they have cut down the top cut from top 64 to top 8, which quite frankly, in my opinion, matters fairly little. I actually thought it was kind of exciting to play this at YCS Bologna. I played this at YCS Lille already, but I actually didn't make day 2 at YCS Lille, so I didn't really experience it. It didn't really make a difference for me there. But at YCS Bologna, I thought it was pretty exciting. It's, of course, it appears harder to make top cut now, right? Because if you end up like, it's sparked this huge debate of is ending 16th place after Swiss now, is that considered a top? And so on. And people, like, there was a lot of like elitism in this whole discussion of like, nah, it's only a top if you have the chance to win, or if it says top 8 is the top cut, then you didn't top. And I say it doesn't matter. I think this whole like counting tops mentality isn't the most healthy anyways. At the end of the day, you are the only person who knows if like when to be proud of yourself after your like performance, right? Like if you look back at your tournament run and you ended up in 15th place at YCS after 15 rounds, you can definitely say I'm proud of that result, no matter if it is considered a top or not by other people. So at the end of the day, try your best and then be proud of yourself no matter what you achieve. In terms of like, if you're trying to win a YCS, I think this matters very little, because realistically, if you are at a point where you would top 64 a YCS, let's say you are 10-2 after 12 rounds, the 3 additional Swiss rounds are basically the same as playing top 64, top 32, and top 16. If you win those 3 rounds, you are in top 8. If you lose one of those rounds, you will not make it to top 8. So it doesn't really matter that much. What it does give you is a little bit of a, if you have a good start to a tournament, like a really good start, it gives you like a little bit of a, like an extra life, basically, right? Like let's say you go 12-0 in a YCS. If you lose round 13, that would normally have been top 64 and you would be out. Whereas now, you go 12-0, you lose round 13, you are still very much in and still probably making top 8, right? And so it rewards it rewards the people that have consistent and very strong starts in tournaments, which I think is good, because now basically you are able, in these 15 rounds, you can lose twice usually. 13-2 is usually guaranteed to make top 8. But it doesn't matter where you have those losses inside those 15 rounds, right? Whereas previously, you could lose twice in 12 rounds, but then if you lost round like top 64, 32, or 16, you were always out, right? And so I think overall it's better, even though of course the thrill of making it to top cut is now harder to achieve, and it's like playing a top cut match feels a little bit different maybe than round 14 of a tournament, but realistically I think it's not that different. Like I can tell you right now, I was 12-2 at YCS Bologna. I played round 15 and I knew if I win I'm in top 8, if I lose I'm out. That felt the pretty much damn same as playing a top 16 match. So like I think people overthink this sort of stuff and like try to interpret too much into it. At the end of the day, what counts as a top or what is an achievement worth being, like, what's worth being proud of is completely up to you. Don't let anyone else decide about this. And ultimately, I think this is just a slightly better system at determining a deserved YCS champion. So it's a fine change in my book. Genesis format. Next up, really big news. They announced Genesis format, and not only did they announce Genesis format, but also kind of like come out of the gate swinging with this format. Genesis format is a new way to play the game, and it's not just like some little side project that they're doing. They actually gave this format a whole lot of attention by giving it like real public events with really good pricing at YCSs, and also announcing that there is going to be a full Genesis YCS main event in 2026. And of course, I mean, I don't have to tell you, but just really quickly, in case anyone is not super involved, Genesis format is a format where there is no ban list, so every card is technically legal, except for link monsters and pendulums. And you have a 100 point budget, and there's a bunch of cards that have point values to them, and you build your deck based on these point values. So for example, Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring is currently 15 points in Genesis format, so if you want to play 3 Ashes, that's 45 points of your 100 point budget, and you only have 55 points left. And the big deal with Genesis is that technically every card is legal, but a lot of cards obviously have 100 points and therefore take up your entire budget. And that goes for mostly the most important, like the most broken floodgates and endboard pieces and locks and stuff. They all have like 100 points. Some cards are straight up impossible to play with each other because one has like 70 and the other one has 31, so they can't be combined, and so on and so forth. And it's basically a completely new way of balancing the game, which I think is super interesting. But most importantly, I think the really big deal about Genesis format is not that it's a different rule set, but it's how it's handled. You know, because I'm convinced that you can make Yu-Gi-Oh! A good or a bad game no matter what rules you use, depending on how you use those rules, right? And in the case of Genesis, it's very clear that the goal of how they're using these rules is to make the game a little less broken, a little less powerful, lower ceiling, less floodgates, and so on and so forth. And in some cases in Genesis format, that has definitely been the case. I've gone to a couple of Genesis locals in my area, and the format is a whole lot less powerful than Advanced Constructed. But of course, there's always something that slips through the cracks in the beginning of a format like this. You know, people have been playing Lunalights, people have been playing Onomat Ryzeal and all that. All of that has already been handled, the things I just mentioned on the Genesis December points update. And that's another thing. Genesis has its own blog where they keep posting updates on it almost like monthly, sometimes even like multiple times a week, where they share their thoughts on the format. And they also give this format updates every 4 to 6 weeks. So unlike the regular ban list schedule of like 4 months, sometimes 5 months, this format gets updated every 4 to 6 weeks with top-notch communication. So Genesis format so far to me has been a huge success. I enjoyed playing it a lot. The reception of the community, I think, was awesome. Like all of the Genesis tournaments at YCS Bologna sold out. I played Genesis on the Friday there. It was awesome. And yeah, the community loves it. The communication is sick. The philosophy behind the format, in my opinion, is really cool. It basically, once again, it's subjective, but it aligns with what I like to see. You know, lower ceiling, more grindy, less floodgates, less broken combos. You know, like it's pretty awesome in my opinion. And I really hope that it continues to thrive and it continues to be a way to enjoy this game. I really do. And I can see myself playing this at basically every YCS on the Friday, because of course, if the main event is Advanced Constructed, I would like to play the main event. But if they keep offering Genesis publics on Friday with cool pricing, I'll keep playing Genesis on Friday. I'll keep going to Genesis locals. I made content about Genesis every once in a while, and people also liked that. So potentially a pretty bright future for Genesis format in 2026. I'm really excited to see where all of this leads Genesis format in the near future. And once again, more ways to play Yu-Gi-Oh! Is always good. Even if you personally don't enjoy playing Genesis format as much, it's important to recognize that this is doing good for the entirety of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Community, And this once again circles back to product quality, because this gave a home to Archmage cards or Radiant Typhoon cards, right? Like this was something where all of a sudden there was a certain demand for those cards that you pulled in like Doom of Dimensions, and you had no one to take them because they weren't good enough for Advanced Constructed. But all of a sudden there is a format where you can play them, and they are actually really strong. Which, once again, if this establishes itself, that's just more demand for Yu-Gi-Oh product, because cards that otherwise wouldn't see play now have a place for you to play them, and that's a win for everybody, even for the people that don't even play Genesis. And that's awesome, you know? So you can see really, I think when you look at this year, like everything combined in one discussion, you can really see how many steps in the right direction were taken this year. And that's also one reason why I wanted to make this video. While I have been criticizing some things, there's a lot of good stuff that happened. And we're not done yet, because one of the best things also, once again, further talking about product quality, happened just this month in December. Announcements of frame breaks. If you haven't seen these yet, then I mean, I'm a really big fan of how these look. I think they look amazing. And this is just a couple of them that I have on screen right now. This is just a couple of the reprint ones. There's also some completely new ones with frame break artworks, but like cards like Dominus Purge in the bottom right here, I think they just look absolutely insane, and this is something that Yu-Gi-Oh has been missing for so long. Whereas other card games have been doing this. This is an awesome way to increase your game's collectability, but also affordability. And now you're going to say, how does this help affordability if these cards are probably going to be expensive? Well, if you can pull expensive cards like these in a set, which basically makes them chase cards, people end up opening more product to get these cards, which ends the other cards end up being in rotation a lot more. If there is high-end chase cards that people actually open product for, then you're gonna have more copies of the cheaper cards, or like the more common cards in the set, like supers, ultras, and even secrets. If there are cards soaking up the value, making the set worth to open, making Yu-Gi-Oh worth to collect in the set, it's gonna help everybody. Even if you personally won't look after these cards, you're gonna end up getting something out of this, hopefully. All of this has been announced for the Limit Over collection, where we're not only going to get these overframe cards, we're also going to get, like, I think it's called Grandmaster Rares, which are basically serialized versions, even fancier versions of the frame breaks. So they're basically going all out with this concept, which is awesome to see. But yeah, once again, and one of the biggest news in all of this is that this is also, at least for the OCG, this is coming to core booster sets. That was one of my main fears when they announced this for the first time, is that this was going to be just a one-time thing in the Limit Over collection, and then it didn't improve the quality of core booster sets because it's just like in one product. For us, we're going to get these for the first time in Rarity Collection 5, but I really hope that we are also going to get overframes in core booster sets just like the OCG, to finally make core boosters worth opening, worth collecting, and actually give us some chase cards, which is the final step that we need to make Yu-Gi-Oh fully affordable. Yu-Gi-Oh is already a lot cheaper than it used to be this year because they had more aggressive reprinting, which is also really good. But the problem with aggressive reprinting is that still, if a card comes out as a secret rare and a secret rare only, you still need that initial investment, because you need Marshmallow Yummy when Doom of Dimensions comes out, not when it's reprinted, right? Like, people want to play that card on initial release. And so if basically Doom of Dimensions as it is right now just has Marshmallow Yummy, it is the chase card in the set, therefore it's expensive. And if Doom of Dimensions had overframe cards, those would be the chase cards, and Marshmallow Yummy would not be as expensive. It would probably still be an expensive secret rare if it was secret rare only, but not as expensive because other cards are soaking up the value of the set a little bit and making it worth worth to open a little bit more. So this is why these overframe cards are a huge deal, and hopefully improve the product quality to make Yu-Gi-Oh as affordable as it can be in the future, which is copium, and this is somewhat of an outlook into 2026. But It was an awesome announcement. Everyone was hype, you know, about these overframe cards. This has been a pretty awesome thing to basically end the year with. And as far as TCG goes, I think that's most of the things. Just a quick summary, I guess, of my thoughts on the year. I thought archetype design was pretty good, especially compared to 2024. I think hybrids are something to take a look at in the future if they want to balance the game better. I think banlist decisions have been pretty solid. Please more of those. And I think a lot of the policy and pricing and frame break announcements have straight up been awesome. So overall, from the TCG side of things, I'll give this year 8 or 9 out of 10. Really, really good. Probably one of the best years since I've started playing Yu-Gi-Oh, which is forever. I'm an unk. Which leaves us with a couple of things. The OCG has gotten a pretty massive ban list towards the end of the year as well, and this is going to be our segue into Master Duel, because Master Duel also follows the OCG pretty closely. And this has been a big deal because they limited Max C. That's the main takeaway from the most recent OCG ban list. There's other changes on here, but I don't want to dissect the entire ban list. I did that in a ban list reaction. But Max C to 1 is a pretty big deal. And the reason why I think it is, because like, you know, I've also talked about this in a previous video, but the reason why I think Max C to 1 is such a big deal even for us, even though we don't even play the OCG, is that, of course, they design cards for the OCG. You know, they design archetypes with the power level of the OCG in mind. And Max C is a huge thing that, you know, I hate how it plays. The card is way too broken, but it does obviously punish combos. And so them removing Max C from the game gradually, you know, they put it to 2 last year, they put it to 1 this year, Copium 2026, they're going to get rid of it for good. That's going to force them to make decks a little less broken. That's just how it works. Without Max C ever resolving, without Max C in the game, they're going to have to think about how they design these archetypes and hopefully make them a little bit more balanced in the future. Of course, I'm hoping for this to come to Master Duel as well. Which leads us to Master Duel. Master Duel has been a little bit all over the place. The way I currently look at Master Duel is basically it's kind of lagging behind the TCG a little bit, and because it has Max C at 2, and because it had Called By at 2 for such a long time, and so on, it always felt like a somewhat worse version of the TCG to me. You know, it had the same archetypes, but later it had worse banlist decisions, and it had Max C. And that's kind of like what's been true for me for the majority of the year. Of course, I really appreciate Master Duel for a few things. Like, I really like streaming it. It gives me a great way to visualize Yu-Gi-Oh! And teach people Yu-Gi-Oh! Because it is the most practical way to play it. And that's awesome. Like, both visually, but also just practically, it's really, really good to have Master Duel. And of course, it gives you another way to compete, you know, with Duelist Cups and like the World Championship being like the big thing for every Yu-Gi-Oh player. Of course, like having more ways to qualify for Worlds is a big deal, right? And that's why I was so happy to try and qualify for Master Duel Worlds in 2023 when it was held for the first time, and I was so happy to win it in 2023. So naturally, I kept playing Master Duel, even though it is in my opinion, little bit worse managed version of the TCG. In 2025, however, it reached a point where they released Malice, which just happens to be one of my least favorite decks in recent history, at a power level that, quite frankly, was completely obscene. It was a power level that we never had Malice at in the TCG. They never had Malice at this power level in the OCG, but they released it basically with multiple copies of Gold Sarcophagus legal. Appaloosa was legal, which it never was in the TCG. They already banned it during Snake Eye format. So basically, and every single Malice card was at 3, right? With March Hare. So like, we when we got March Hare in the TCG, the deck had no Appaloosa. It had no Link Decoder. The Malice names were already at 2. None of that was true for Master Duel. They got it at full power. Right, and that was right before Worlds as well. So that it kind of broke me. I'm not gonna lie. Like after Worlds, which I was thankfully able to participate thanks to Quantal qualifying in Atlantean Mermail Duelist Cup. After there was like obviously Malice was by far the deck with the highest win rate at the World Championship. I think it had like 90% going first win rate, or maybe a little bit. I'm not sure. The number was obscene. I'm not sure what the number was, but I think it was less than 90 actually. That might be exaggerated. It was a high number. It was a high, maybe 80. I don't know. But I took a break from Master Duel after Worlds because the power level that the game operated at, like, I have my struggles with the power level sometimes in the TCG, but then you add full power Malice to the mix, you add the Maxi minigame to the mix. I took a break. And I posted about it, and I said I was gonna do more TCG content and stuff like that. Because I think it's been a rough year for Master Duel, quite frankly. They've been doing a little bit better recently with the release of Draco Tail, but and that has caused me to return and play the December Duelist Cup. But all things considered, I think Master Duel has a little bit more work cut out for them compared to the TCG, in my personal opinion. I really hope they copy the max C hits from the OCG, and then we can eventually phase out some of the crazy things. I mean, they just now announced that they put White Rabbit to 1 in order to combat Malice, which surely people are not just going to replace 2 copies of White Rabbit with 2 copies of Achichi Adignister or Signet Mining or Mathmech Circular to just combo anyways. Eventually they will learn that they have to ban another Malice card in order to really beat Malice. But yeah, compared to what Malice was at in August, they've already done a lot in their defense. You know, they are trying. They've banned Ransom, they limited Underground, they limited Dormouse, they limited Chessy Cat, now they limited White Rabbit, they limited Allure. They did a lot, but I don't know if it's enough if they don't ban another Malice card. But I also don't want to rant about Malice too much. So for Master Duel, I'd give the year, like, I don't know, a 5 out of 10 or whatever. The time before Malice was like okay, I guess, even though I mean it was a lot of like Atlantean Mermail and stuff as well. So yeah, the time after Draco Tail came out was pretty cool to me. That's what's saving it from being less than a 5 out of 10. But you can let me know in the comments down below. Basically, the thing that really makes Master Duel work for me is just that I can stream it so easily, right? And it's just the most convenient thing to do visually on stream, and I can talk to my chat the easiest because I don't have to interact with an opponent in like a chat box and stuff like that, which can sometimes be pretty tiring. So other than that, I think that leads me to my personal stuff throughout the year, right? Like my performances, how did I experience the year personally, also in terms of content creation, because there's a few things I tried this year that I thought were at least interesting. And of course, I mean, we can start with just my TCG performances, I suppose, which I thought were fine this year, nothing too exceptional. But I also like, I think I've gotten pretty good at evaluating when a performance, when I was expected to do well, basically, right? Like what I'm trying to say by this is like sometimes there are tournaments where I just don't get to prepare as much as I want to because of other factors, and then I don't do well, but then I don't like beat myself up too much about not doing well because, well, that was obviously not going to happen if I don't put in the time and the work. But I think out of I played 3 YCSs this year. I played Nationals, I played Euros, and I played Worlds, and I topped 3 of those tournaments. I topped Nationals, I topped YCS Bologna, even with the new top 8 thingy, which I thought was exciting, and I topped Euros with Vanquish Soul. So the decks that I played in those tournaments were Pure Mitsu at Nationals, Pure Vanquish Soul at Euros, and then for YCS Bologna, I did give into the combo nature of the format and the hybrid stuff, and I played K9 Vanquish Soul, mostly as a response to Draco Tail being so popular. But I think I can happily say I did my best this year for the tournaments that I did have the time to prepare for, and I did decently well at those. So yeah, of course, no win this year, but I mean, you really can't expect a win every single year. I'm okay with 3 tops out of those events. The event I performed the worst at is the Master Duel World Championships, where I played Memento, whereas Quantal played Malice and Emra played Ryziel. So to an extent, I think I was always expected to perform the worst, because it was always Malice was the best deck by far. Ryziel was kind of okay, and then the third deck was always going to be like a little behind. So I wasn't expected to do exceptionally well, but I mean, I think I had an okay win rate for the first couple of rounds, and then I ended up losing a ton in the last like 2 or 3. So we didn't end up making it out of group stages. So of course I'm disappointed with my Worlds performance, but at the same time, we won in 23 and got second in 24, so I don't feel too bad overall with how Master Duel Worlds have gone for us. So pretty okay year in terms of that, but content wise I've been happy. I think it's been a pretty cool year, because one thing I learned is that I shouldn't stress myself too much about these sort of things, when in reality I can just do whatever fulfills me the most at the moment. And that is what I did after Master Duel Worlds. I said like, hey, we're gonna do less Master Duel now, maybe none for a while. And people were okay with it. I mean, some people told me like, hey, unfortunately I only play Master Duel, so I'm gonna like I don't know, unsubscribe or don't watch the streams anymore because, like, you know, no Master Duel, which is completely okay. But overall, like, the numbers were completely fine after. And I was happy about that support. You know, it's always something that as a content creator, you have to deal with the fact that, like, you are dependent on these numbers to an extent. And it's good to see that, like, people still watch even if I do something different, or if I don't win a tournament in a year. You know, like, you always, like, as a competitive player, you always ask yourself, you know, like, are people watching because they just like me as a creator, or are they watching because I'm successful in Yu-Gi-Oh? And so seeing the numbers throughout this year, even though I haven't won Worlds or haven't won a YCS this year or something like that, was pretty wholesome. I was pretty happy with that, because it gave me that feeling of, like, you know, people watch because it's fun, because it's entertaining, because it's educational, which is all I'm, of course, aiming for. And so that's pretty cool. One other thing I do want to talk about is the Worlds grind, because when I quote unquote took a break from Master Duel after Worlds, I did say, hey, I'm gonna go for the Worlds grind again in TCG, because I was so hyped to do it. And that went only okay. I think at the moment I'm like in 30th something place in the Worlds points leaderboard, and top 16 get to play in the playoffs. And I got a huge jump from YCS Bologna, because previously some of my regionals haven't gone as well, because basically a few things have changed about the Worlds race from back when I used to do it. You know, I went to TCG Worlds through the Worlds race in 2017, 18, and 19, and then I haven't done it since. And there's a lot more people doing it. Regionals are a lot bigger these days. And I used to just use regionals as like my testing ground for bigger tournaments. And I used to like do pretty well at regionals, but mostly I was using them to test for YCSs. And it feels like these days you have to basically test for regionals, because the regionals are more important than YCSs, because, for example, the French Open gave you more points than YCS Bologna did, because it had like over 1,000 players, which is of course massive, but it's still smaller than YCS Bologna, so I'm not sure how I like that. At the same time, I kind of forgot how time intensive the Worlds grind is. Initially I shifted my streaming schedule to account for it a little bit. I said like, hey, we're gonna change the streaming schedule in a way where I'm gonna stream less in order to facilitate the Worlds grind for me. And then when I started doing that, I realized that it's not as fulfilling as I thought it was gonna be. Like, I missed streaming basically, and I kind of underestimated how big of a deal that was to me, you know, to only stream like twice in a week, because I was gone for 3 or 4 days because of regionals. Like, I traveled on the Friday, came back on the Monday, like streamed for 2 or 3 days, and then the next regionals. And I was just like, you know, I felt like it was taking up too much of my life to play this many regionals, right? And so at some point I said, you know what, I'm still going to play some of the big regionals, but I'm not going to do the hardcore grind. And if it's not meant to be, then it's not meant to be. And I think that's put me in a much healthier place. And funnily enough, after I made that decision is when I started doing better at regionals, but also at YCSs, at YCS Bologna. It's like now I started to gain more points and stuff. So maybe the takeaway for me is like I need proper balancing in my life, and then things are going to work out anyways. That's been my ramble for 2025. It's been a long video slash podcast. Please feel free to let me know how you liked this video. I'm sorry if it was maybe a little bit all over the place throughout the thing. I wrote myself a little bullet points to get through it, but it was a long one, so there's a chance that I rambled a little bit too much. It's been a good year overall. For myself as a content creator, as a player, it was okay, but I try to not measure my self-worth too much in success anymore, because I don't think I have to prove to anyone that I'm good at this card game. At least I hope I don't have to, especially not to myself. I'll try to do my best. I'll keep trying to do my best as long as I enjoy this game, which I do enjoy it a lot at the moment. So things are looking good for 2026. If you have any suggestions in terms of the content or any other things you expect in 2026, feel free to let me know in the comments down below. Until then, if you've listened all the way to this point, thank you so much. And everyone who's been supportive throughout the year, you know, I just got the little purple heart because we reached 5 million hours watched on Twitch, which is an absurd number. We are closing in on 100,000 subs on YouTube, so I'm gonna get the little thingy as well. It means a lot to me, you know, in moments like these where I just look back at my entire year and then I just realize, hey, I have the ability to basically create content about this game that I love for a living. It really means a lot to me. So thank you all for your support. Thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing and all that good stuff all the time. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your year and a wonderful start to 2026. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye. Peace.